Hi folks, I'm going to sew a casserole carrier. I hope you'll keep watching. So before we get started sewing, I wanted to show you what you're going to need. You'll need a set of dowels. This version of a casserole carrier has wooden handles, so you'll need a set of dowels. Mine are only 3/8 inch. These are some I had left from doing flags for my daughter-in-law's school. They're only 3/8 inch. My casserole dishes are very heavy, so if I'm actually going to use this carrier, I would switch to 1/2 inch dowels. These are kind of thin, and I'm not sure that they would hold up with the weight of my casserole dishes. So we'll just put that aside. You can use Velcro to attach the inner layer, the wraparound layer on your carrier. You can use Velcro. Personally, I don't like sewing Velcro, so I'm going to make ties for mine. I think you saw the ties in the blue one that I made, my trial cut. I used ties. So what I've done is cut 2 strips 20 inches long. That might be a little too long, but 20 inches long. And I've pressed in 1 inch at each end and then pressed to the middle and over. And I'm just going to sew right along to make this into a tie that we attach to the wraparound layer. I'll call that inside layer the wraparound layer because it does wrap right around your casserole dish. So I have 2 of those. We'll put those aside. For my wraparound layer, we have our pieces. Our fabric is cut one of the outside fabrics and one of the inside fabrics. You have 1 piece of each, and you're cutting it 39 inches. That's why I have it folded over, because it would be off camera. So 39 inches long and 11 inches wide. And for that wraparound layer, you're also going to want 2 layers of batting, because this is what's going to insulate your casserole dish. I'm just using regular cotton batting because I have a lot of it left over from quilting projects. And you might want to use Insulbright, but I'm using regular cotton. 2 layers for that wraparound layer. And 1 layer of fabric, your outside fabric and your inside fabric, each to be cut 39 inches long by 11 inches wide. As you can see, I cut my batting larger to make sure that if it shifts during the sewing, I don't end up with any empty gaps. So I will trim all that away after I've sewn. So this is your inside layer. We're just going to put that aside because we don't need it right away. And my outside layer. This is the layer where we'll do the cutouts for the handles. So for these, I've cut 14 inches wide and again 39 inches long. It's folded in half. And you have 1 layer of outside fabric and 1 layer of inside fabric. So again, 14 by 39 and 1 layer of batting. This is the part that's on the outside with the handles. You don't need 2 layers of batting on that. So I used 1 layer of cotton batting. I did look at doing a design space file for this project, but because of this layer with the handles being 39 inches long, you can only cut 23.5, so you would need to cut this in half. And then your width on this layer is 14 inches, so you would have to cut that in half also. So you would end up with a seam running across in both directions, which I don't think would look very attractive. So we're going to get started with the sewing portion of this, but before we do, there's a cut we need to make. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so the next step that we're going to do is make our cutouts for our handles. But I wanted to mention that when you do this, you want to lay your fabric good sides together, the way it will be when you sew it. Because if you have it in the reverse, so you have both pieces good side up, you make your cut and then flip the fabric over to sew it, your cut might not line up the way it should. So we've taken this long 39-inch length and we're going to lay it out folded on the length. So you want to fold on the length. And now we're going to make our cutout for our handle. So we're just going to, I'll take this little ruler because my Cricut ruler is very large. So what you want to cut is, we'll mark it off so you can see it, 2 inches in and 4 inches long. So on that 4-inch mark, there we go. I'll pull this up a little so you can see it a little better. So on the fold, you're going to be cutting 2 inches in and 4 inches long. So you're going to be taking a rectangle off like that. And this is going to give you the opening for your dowel and your handle and the fold over that goes over the dowel. So we're just going to cut that off. There we go. We cut that piece out. You have a nice little 4x4 square. You can always keep it for something else. And we're going to turn this around. Make sure it's lined up nice and straight. My cut is a little off there. That's fine. The important layers are straight. So we're going to do the same thing. I'll mark it off so you can see it again. We're going to go 2 inches in and 4 inches along the length. And 2 inches. So there we have it. This is our cutout. Just cut that out. Set that aside and clear that up. Okay. So we're going to open this up. And now you can see how we made the cutout for the handles. So eventually your dowel is going to go in and this will fold over. But it'll be right side out, of course, by then. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is lay this out on our batting, straighten it all up. It's a little hard to show you on camera. We'll lay out our batting, and we're going to lay these down on top of the batting. We've cut enough extra room in the batting so that if it shifts, if it moves around while we're sewing, we'll be fine. Make sure everything lines up when we move it. That looks good. I'm going to use some pins to hold it all in place while I sew. You can use straight pins, spray basting, whatever it is that you like. Okay, so what you're not going to be adding any bias tape to this, so you're sewing it good side up on the batting, good side down with the inside piece. Just going to make sure everything lines up. Takes a little fussing because it's a big piece. I like to pin it just to make sure things don't move too much while I'm sewing. Put a few more pins in it. So before I finish doing the pinning, what we're going to do now is sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam. But we're going to stop on the side. I'm going to mark it off. I'm going to start here and go around. And I'm going to stop at this pin so that I have an opening to turn this right side out after trimming off the excess batting. So you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around and stop here. Don't worry about this area. We're going to cut that out when we trim the excess batting. So I'm going to get that all pinned, do my sewing, and I'll be back to show you what's next. And we're back, and I've sewn all the way around all the perimeter of my project, leaving a space open so that I can turn it right side out. And the next thing I'm going to do is trim up all the excess seam allowance and batting. I'm going to make it nice and neat. So we're going to do this all the way around. Okay, so we've got that all trimmed up nice and clean, and now we're going to reverse it. So we're going to pull all our corners out. It's a lot of fabric, so it's a lot of pulling through. There's our opening. Just going to push all the corners out nice and neat. As pointy as you can get them. That's why it's good to do lots of trimming of excess fabric. Straighten all that out when we press it. Okay. We'll go to the other end. Good. Okay, so this is the outside of our carrier. These are the handles that fold to hold the dowels. I'm going to roll out my seams so they're nice and flat. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is take this to my pressing station. I'm going to press it all nice and flat so my corners are nice and crisp. At the same time, I'm going to fold in the opening and we'll pin it. I'll pin it for now, and we're going to press that. That looks good. Okay, so now we're going to, as I mentioned, press this all nice and flat, make sure our corners are nice and crisp, everything is great, and then we're going to top stitch all the way around, completely all the way around. And if you're going to do some quilting on it, now is the time to do it. You would want to get all your quilting done now. This is a busy pattern, so I think I'm just going to leave it plain. I don't think I'm going to quilt it. So I'm just going to go do my pressing, get my seams nice and straight, and I'm going to top stitch all the way around, and I'll be back to show you what we do next. My top stitching is done all the way around. I've closed up the opening that I used to turn it right side out. And the next thing we're going to do is to make the pockets for our dowels. So we'll just turn this around. Okay, you can go 1.5 to 2 inches for your dowel pocket. I like about 1.5 inches. Line that up. I like about 1.5 inches so that some of my outside fabric is still showing. If you go 2 inches, you're about even with this opening. So I like about 1.5 inches. Let's line that up. There we go. And I'm just going to stick a pin in it. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. About 1.5 inches. That looks pretty even. There we go. And I'll put a pin in here. So if I had the 1/2 inch dowels today, I would put it in. By the way, you want to cut it a little shorter than the width of it so that you can close up the sides. So measure out the width. This is about 13 inches wide. I would cut my dowel at 12 inches so that I'm able to close the end of this. But because I'm not keeping this dowel, today I'm not going to close the end. I'm going to sew back and forth twice. I want to make sure that this part is right along the seam that I top stitched. I'm going to go one direction and back again. I'm going to do the same on the other side and back again. If I was using the right dowel today, I would also do that up the sides to make sure that the dowel doesn't slip out of the ends. The thing is, that makes it not washable. You don't want to put it in the washing machine with a dowel in it. If you leave them open, you can, or you can just hand stitch it so that you can pull that out and take your dowel out if you want to put it in the washing machine. My casserole dishes have lids I would probably wrap it also in stretch wrap so that it didn't leak on the inside of this. But just in case, if ever you wanted to wash it, you'd want to be able to take the dowel out. So I don't think I would machine sew the sides either way. I think maybe just stitch it by hand so I can take it apart if I want to take the dowel out. So that's that end. And we're going to do the same on this end. So we're just going to line it up, and we're going to go down about 1.5 inches. That should do it. Put a pin through. And again, 1.5 inches on this side. Want to make sure they look even. And we'll put a pin through it. And the same thing on this side. Also, right along that top stitching row that we have, we'll go one direction and back again to make sure it's really good and secure. I'm going to do that with the dowel out. If you are planning to close up the ends and make it permanent, you want to do that with the dowel in. I would do that with my zipper foot on my machine so that you have the space. You're not banging into your dowel. You don't do anything to damage your machine. So this is the handle part. We're almost ready. It's almost done. So I'm going to get these sewn. I'll be back to show them to you, and we'll move on to the next step. And we're done preparing the pockets for the outside of our caddy. So my dowels, if I had the right dowels, they would already be in, and I may or may not have closed up the ends. I'm not sure that I want to close it permanently. And we'll do this side. We have a nice pocket for them. Go. Center them up, and I've done 2 rows. I guess because this is white it might be a little hard to see, but I've done 2 rows of stitching back and forth where I had my original top stitching, so I know that the handle is good and secure and it's not going to come off if I'm carrying something heavy. So this is the outside of the caddy done, and we're going to move on to the inside. We'll just set this aside for now. Okay, for the inside of our caddy, we have 2 layers of batting. So if you have a walking foot, you definitely want to put it on your machine. I used it on the outside also, but I think pretty much definitely with the 2 layers of batting, you want to have a walking foot on your machine. If you really want to do this and you don't have a walking foot, just go very slow so that you're not moving your fabric around too much and getting too wayward on your batting. So we're going to line this all up. Nice and straight. We have our fabric good sides together. Actually, I'm going to turn it over so I can sew on this white side first. Line your fabric all up. Make sure you've given yourself some room on the batting for movement. There we go. I'm going to pin this. A few pins, not too many, but with the double batting I want to make sure that it doesn't move too much. So we're going to do the same thing we did on the outside panel, as far as I'm going to leave an opening to turn this right side out when I get done. So I'm going to sew all the way around over to this side and stop here. Start and stop. So I have an opening to turn this right side out. I'll get that done. We'll come back, we'll trim it all up, and we'll turn it right side out. This will be the inside that wraps around our casserole dish. That's why we have 2 layers of batting, to give it really good insulation. So I'm going to get this all set, and I'll be back to show you what I do next. We're back, and we've got our stitching done all the way around, except for the gap that we left for turning right side out. So I'll just get the rest of the pins out here. And we're going to trim it up. There we go. Get our pins out. Okay. I'm going to be trimming down the seam allowance all the way around and taking off the excess batting, except I'm not going to trim my seam allowance where my opening is, because we need enough fabric to be able to turn it in. I'm just going to take away the excess batting in that area. But we'll keep our extra seam allowance. It makes it much easier to turn in if you have that extra fabric. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to take my ruler and my rotary cutter and get it all cleaned up. Okay, so now we're going to turn it right side out. I'll just open that up, grab the corners, and pull them through. We want to push out our corners nice and sharp. Good. There we go. So now we're going to Press it all nice and flat. Press in our opening. Pin that in. And just like we did with the handle piece, we're going to top stitch, press, and top stitch all the way around to make it nice and flat. There we go. It's a good amount of fabric to sew through with the double batting. And this is going to wrap over our casserole plate. Okay, at the same time that I'm top stitching this, I'm going to prepare my ties that will attach it together. If you're going to use Velcro, that'll be a little different than what I'm going to do, but I'll prepare my ties at the same time. So I'll get that done and I'll be back to show you what's next. So our top stitching is all done, if you can see it. It's up to you, whatever you decide, if you want to quilt all these pieces or not. So what I'm going to do next is install my ties. So I'm just going to try to make myself a center mark. That's pretty good. I know where my center is. And I know that with the lid, my casserole dish is 13 inches wide. So I'm going to line this up about halfway. You were going to add Velcro instead of ties. Now is when you would place your Velcro, mark it off, and decide where you want it to be. But I'm going to use ties. So I've sewn my ties. And what I did is, on one end, I went all the way to the end on one end, and on the other end, I've left about an inch of it just folded in, not sewn. And that's how I'm going to sew them on. So I have a nice flat surface. I'm going to do probably 2 lines of, there's no stress on these ties. They're not holding any of the weight. I've done the same thing on this one. I've left about an inch open on the end. I'm going to put it here. And just pin it on. There we go. And I'm going to use these ties to keep mine closed. I think ties are cute too. It's a little different and I think they're cute. There we go. So I'm going to get those sewn on. And then I'll be back and we'll attach this inside portion to the wraparound with the handles, and then we'll be done. And my ties are installed. They're sewn on, all nice and neat. So now we're going to attach this layer to the outside layer. And honestly, the easiest way I found to do this, to get it centered, is just to try it. So we're going to put this on. I'm going to tie it up. The first one that I made, I spent time measuring and marking to center it up, and it was still not looking right. So the easiest way I found is just to try it out. Then we'll know if we've got the center right. Look at that, first try. Not bad. So if you put it on and your handles are off One's longer than the other. You know you're not centered. So we're just going to try it out again. We know we're centered. This works perfectly. See, my dowels are a bit too thin. I'm going to change them for 1/2-inch dowels. That feels a little crooked. That feels better, I think. Okay, so I'm going to untie it again. I'm going to open this up, and before I move it, I don't want to move my casserole dish because I might move this off center. I'm just going to stick a pin through it. Anywhere is fine just to keep it in place, and we'll repin it after. Okay, take my casserole dish away. That looks about right. Looks a little off center to me. That looks better. That looks better. Okay, so I'm going to pin all over the place. Make sure it doesn't move while I'm sewing. That looks good. Add a bunch of pins around. Okay, so what we're going to do now is sew along our seam allowance, down, across, back up, and across again. There's no need to do it twice because the weight is actually on this outside part. So once or twice doesn't matter. You can do just once. So down your seam allowance, across, up, and across again. And that will secure the two pieces together, and we'll be done. And we're done. You can see where I've sewn to attach the two pieces together. There's a rectangle of sewing. It shows pretty good on the white side, actually. So there we go. We're going to put our casserole dish back inside. That looks pretty centered. Going to tie it up. Of course, you can use Velcro. That's completely up to you. A lot of people use Velcro. Do our ties. And we'll put our dowels back in. Mine would be in already if I had the right size. There we go. And we'll do this one. I also thought it would be cute if you had some decorative buttons, or even in my case a dark green button or a snowflake button or something like that. It would be cute to add a couple of buttons where the handles fold over and make it look like they're buttoned down. That would be cute too, and it would dress it up even more. But I didn't want to put white on white, and I don't think I have any dark green. So there we go. There's our casserole carrier, all done. I think these make wonderful gifts. I think they're terrific. They're really fun. And who wouldn't enjoy receiving one like this with something yummy inside? So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a long one, but it's so worthwhile. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that you're going to make some casserole carriers, and please post pictures in our Facebook group so I can see how they turn out. I'm really excited about this project, and I hope you like it. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and thank you for watching.